The world as it was had always been defined by its rigid, predictable laws of physics. Then, 10 years ago, the system manifested. Holographic interfaces flickered into existence for everyone, displaying levels, stats, and classes. Once relegated to video games and folklore, began appearing from newly formed dungeons, not in some distant fantasy realm, but right there in the mundane streets of Mesa, Arizona. The world had become a LitRPG, a game overlaid onto reality, but a game with deadly, irreversible consequences. Most people adapted. New classes like warrior, mage, rogue, and crafter emerged. Dungeons were cleared, monster spawns managed, and a new, perilous normal was established. The system was efficient, ruthless, and entirely new to everyone. Everyone, that is, except for Arthur Art Jenkins. Wasn't an adventurer. He was a Tier 1 bookstore owner, a designation that offered absolutely no combat skills and pitiful stats: STR7, DEX6, INT 16, WIS 14, CHR 10. His life revolved around the smell of old paperbacks, the quiet rustle of turning pages, and the occasional customer in his dusty old bookstore. The written word. Art was, by all accounts, a nobody in this new, dangerous world. He wore an old, faded t-shirt, spectacles perpetually perched on his nose, and harbored a secret. Before the system, before the real world became a game, Art was a legend. Not in this new reality, but in Aethelgard Online, a forgotten MMORPG from the late 90s, renowned for its punishing difficulty, deep lore, and notoriously complex mechanics. Art, under the handle Artagus the Ancient, was one of its undisputed top players, a Tier 12 Archmage who knew every hidden quest, every exploit, every subtle nuance of its code. One sweltering afternoon, a small goblin grunt level 3 wandered into the written word. Clearly disoriented, probably having clipped through a minor dungeon portal that opened in the alley, most adventurers would dispatch it swiftly. Art, however, just sighed, then paused. Strange flicker in his system interface. Anomalous data match detected. Target, goblin grunt, Aethelgard _origin_code_ variant user, Artagus the Ancient Aethelgard Legacy _data Legacy System, reinitialization in progress. Description: the system has detected a profound overlap in data signatures. Users' dormant Aethelgard Online character data is being reintegrated with the current reality system. Warning: may cause system instability. Art stared, bewildered, as his system interface, usually a blank gray, exploded into a vibrant pixelated display reminiscent of Aethelgard Online. His current stats, for a terrifying second, were overlaid with his old ones. STR 775 Dex, 660 Int, 16, 180 Capped, Temporary Override WIS, 14, 150 Capped, Temporary Override, CHR 1080 New Class, TIER 1 Bookstore Owner, greater than Tier 12 Legacy Archmage, Aethelgard Skills Gained, Fireball Tier 12, Ice LANCE Tier 12, Ancient Runic Mastery Tier 12, 300 plus Skills Warning, Legacy System Override, duration 1 minute. Mana cost, rapid degradation, may cause temporary system fatigue. Art blinked. A full minute of his old power. The goblin grunt, seeing a moment of hesitation, lunged. Art, without thinking, extended his hand. Idiot. Fireball. A colossal sphere of crackling flame, far more potent than any spell he'd seen from current mages, erupted from his palm. It incinerated the goblin instantly, leaving a small, perfectly circular scorch mark on the floor of his bookstore. Goblin grunt deleted. XP gained. 50 legacy bonus. Legacy system override expired. Reverting to base class. Tier 1 Bookstore Owner. System fatigue. Minus 50% all stats for 5 minutes. Art collapsed onto a stack of forgotten novels. Panting. Well, he muttered, That was a bit more than I expected. His old Aethelgard Online character, the Legacy player, had just glitched into reality. Asterisk, the system fatigue was brutal. For 5 agonizing minutes, Art felt like his brain was made of cotton and his limbs were filled with lead. But the thrill of wielding his old power, even for a minute, was intoxicating. He was no longer just a bookstore owner. He was a dormant god, a sleeping legend. His new permanent Legacy player passive skill was subtle. It allowed him to identify Aethelgard_origin, _code, variants in the current system, which were monsters, items, or even environmental features that shared their fundamental programming with his old game. This was key. Only these variants triggered his Legacy system override. His new int and whiz stats had permanently risen. Not to his old levels, but significantly, reflecting his awakened connection to the system's deeper code. He also gained system cooldown passive, allowing him to track the diminishing duration of his fatigue and the recharge time of his next override. Art, with the precision of a veteran gamer, began to research. The Great Data Surge hadn't just created a generic LitRPG world, but had partially overwritten reality with fragments of every online game ever created. The system was a chaotic patchwork, and Aethelgard Online was a particularly large, powerful piece of that patch. He realized he needed a network. His bookstore, ironically, became his base of operations. He started looking for fellow Aethelgard Online veterans, but they were rare. Most had given up gaming years ago. His first ally came in the form of a young, brash Tier 4 rogue named Kale, who, after hearing rumors of a mysterious old man who one-shot a goblin with pure fire magic, sought out Art. Kalen was a frustrated adventurer constantly battling the system's new, unfamiliar mechanics. Art, recognizing Kellen's potential, shared his secret cautiously. He showed Kalen the faded, pixelated icon of his Legacy Archmage class and the short burst of power. Kalen was skeptical, but intrigued. Their first foray was into the recently opened Desert Scorpion Den, Tier 3 Aethelgard_variant dungeon. Located in the outskirts of Mesa, Art, using his Legacy player passive, identified the dungeon and its inhabitants as Aethelgard variants. He would act as Artagus the Ancient for precisely 1 minute, then revert to the Bookstore Owner, leaving Kalen to clean up the mess. The strategy was absurd, suicidal even. Art, with his decades of Aethelgard Online experience, knew every trick, would use his minute of power to perfectly stun Tier 12, the strongest giant scorpions level 8. Blind Tier 12, the ranged ones, and lay down powerful area of effect, IU, damage over time spells Tier 12, that would slowly whittle down their health even after his power faded. Kalen, a skilled rogue, would then move in during the chaos, exploiting the debuffed monsters, using his stealth Tier 4 and backstab Tier 4 to finish them off. The first few attempts were clumsy, but they learned to synchronize. Dungeon cleared. Desert Scorpion Den, Aethelgard_variant, Kellen, XP plus 5,000. Level up, Tier 5 Rogue. Art, XP plus 1,000, Legacy bonus. New passive Legacy coordination slightly. Reduces Legacy system override cooldown when working with a bonded ally. Art had found his first apprentice, and a path to making his minute of power truly count. Word began to spread in hushed tones through the underground adventurer communities in Mesa, not of Art himself, but of a mysterious old man who knew ancient game mechanics and could temporarily break the system. More Aethelgard Online. Veterans, long retired and disenfranchised by the new system, began to seek him out. His bookstore, The Written Word, became a clandestine meeting place for the Guild of Old Souls. They were a motley crew, a former Aethelgard_warrior, now a Tier 2 baker, an Aethelgard_healer, now a Tier 1 librarian, and even a surprisingly agile Aethelgard_rogue, now a Tier 3 IT support tech. They were old, slow, and they're new. Classes were useless in combat, but their minds held decades of Aethelgard Online lore, Art. Now a Tier 2 legacy architect taught them to identify Aethelgard_origin_code_variants. He trained them in the precise timing required to exploit. The minute of their legacy system override, their combined legacy coordination passive began to significantly reduce his own cooldown, allowing him to use his power more frequently. Their strategy evolved. The former baker, as a legacy_paladin, would pop his minute-long divine shield. Tier 10 to draw aggro and tank damage. The librarian, as a legacy_cleric, would unleash powerful mass heals Tier 10 and buffs Tier 10. The IT tech, as a legacy_assassin, would use stealth Tier 10 and single target burst damage Tier 10 to eliminate key threats. They would dive into Aethelgard_variant dungeons, a coordinated ballet of perfectly timed minute-long bursts of god tier power, followed by a frantic retreat as their legacy system override expired. Ellen, now a Tier 7 rogue, provided the vital sustained damage and evasion. Covering their vulnerable cooldown periods, the mainstream adventurers, those who followed the current system's rules, were utterly baffled. They saw these strange surges of high-level power, followed by the appearance of seemingly ordinary citizens. Then the powerful rogue Kaelin, completing dungeons with unprecedented efficiency. They reported these anomalies to the system enforcers. System enforcers, cold, logical constructs of the system, investigated. They registered the anomalous power spikes. They couldn't find any cheating. The legacy system override was, in effect, a system-approved glitch, fundamental oversight in the great data surge that allowed these old data packages to momentarily override the current reality's programming. The system itself had no protocol for a player reverting to an old character sheet. It simply didn't compute. It was a blind spot, a glitch in the fabric of reality itself. Legacy system recognition, plus 5,000 subsystem new class. Tier 3 legacy, Grandmaster. New skill, systemic blind spot passive description. Reduces the chance of detection by system enforcers when using legacy system override. Also allows the user to subtly identify other hidden system anomalies. Art and his Guild of Old Souls were operating in a literal blind spot of the system. Asterisk, the Guild of Old Souls, with Kaelin as their primary combat arm, became an unparalleled force against Aethelgard_variant threats across Mesa. They cleared dungeons, secured artifacts, and even helped protect struggling communities from unexpected monster spawns. Art, the Legacy Grandmaster, coordinated it all. His mind a database of ancient game mechanics, his WIS stat was now incredibly high, reflecting his profound understanding of both the old game's lore and the new system's operational principles. He was beginning to see the patterns, subtle connections between the two. But their success also attracted the attention of a more insidious threat, data corruption. These weren't monsters. They were glitches made manifest, sections of code that had become sentient and destructive, trying to unravel the system itself. They targeted the legacy variants, seeing them as particularly juicy targets for their chaotic energy. One particular data corruption entity, Tier 8 Aethelgard_fragment, a swirling vortex of broken pixels and distorted sound, began to destabilize. The newly opened sunken temple, Tier 7 Aethelgard_variant dungeon beneath Lake Powell. This entity was a particular threat to Art's group, as it could actively debuff legacy system override, making their power bursts unreliable. Art realized he couldn't just rely on raw power. He needed to understand the data corruption itself. Using his systemic blind spot passive, he began to analyze the entity. It wasn't just random chaos. It was a fragmented piece of the old Aethelgard Online code. Warped and twisted by the great data surge, it was a glitch from his own game. He contacted Cypher, the enigmatic glitch hunter from the shadows of Erathos Prime. Cross-system connection he had subtly established through a rare, ancient datacoms exploit he knew from Aethelgard Online. Cypher, intrigued by the Aethelgard code, agreed to help, offering insights into the nature of data corruption from a pure system hacker perspective. Art learned that the data corruption entity was a broken fragment of the Aethelgard end-boss. Lord Malachor, whose code had become unmoored and destructive, It was trying to reassemble itself, but incorrectly, creating devastating paradoxes. Art's ultimate ability began to coalesce. Legacy System Recode, Active Ultimate.
Oh.
This skill would allow him to temporarily rewrite a small section of an Aethelgard_variant S code, fixing a glitch or introducing a beneficial one. It was incredibly mana-intensive, but it was the only way to deal with the data corruption. He had to fight a ghost from his own past, not with spells, but with code. Asterisk, the final confrontation took place deep within the sunken temple. The data. Corruption entity Lord Malachor, fragment pulsed with destructive energy, tearing at the fabric of the dungeon. It was trying to consume the entire Aethelgard_variant dungeon, threatening to unleash a chaotic, reality-bending vortex, the Guild of Old Souls, with Kaelin leading the charge, performed their synchronized legacy system overrides. The Baker Paladin tanked, the Librarian Cleric healed, the IT Tech Assassin dealt damage. But the data corruption entity was powerful, constantly applying legacy system debuffs, making their power bursts inconsistent. Art, Legacy Grandmaster, focused his immense int and wis on the data corruption entity. He used Legacy System Recode, pouring all his mana into it. He wasn't trying to fight it directly. He was trying to patch it. He targeted the fragment's core coding, searching for the original Lord Malachor's signature. He found it. A loop. A broken subroutine that was causing the destructive chaos. He used Legacy System Recode to reinsert the original termination protocol for Lord Malachor, the very code that defeated him in Aethelgard Online. The data corruption entity shrieked, a sound of pure data agony, twisted, distorted, and then slowly began to unravel, not in destruction, but in a clean, Legantoress like a perfectly executed server shutdown. The chaos subsided. The sunken temple stabilized. Data corruption entity, Lord Malachor, fragment successfully derezzed. System integrity restored. Aethelgard_variant art. Level up. Tier 3 Legacy Grandmaster, Tier 4 Legacy Architect. New ultimate skill. Aethelgard Manifest Active Ultimate. Description: allows the user to temporarily transform a non-Aethelgard_variant area into an Aethelgard_variant, making all creatures and environmental features vulnerable to legacy system overrides. Extremely high mana cost, short duration. Art. Collapsed, exhausted, but triumphant. He hadn't just defeated a monster, it fixed a broken piece of reality. News of the data corruption S defeat and the miraculous stabilization of the sunken temple spread quickly. The system enforcers, though still unable to fully comprehend Art's methods, registered a net positive systemic event. The Guild of Old Souls revered him as their leader, a true legacy architect. Art, now a Tier 4 legacy architect, was no longer confined to Mesa. His systemic blind spot allowed him to subtly manipulate the system's detection algorithms, making him virtually untraceable when operating within Aethelgard_variants. His Aethelgard Manifest skill allowed him to temporarily turn any area into an Aethelgard zone, giving his guild an unprecedented tactical advantage. He began to teach his guild not just how to exploit the legacy system override, but how to understand the underlying code of reality itself. He saw the world not as a fixed game, but as a vast, malleable program. Kaelin, his first apprentice, had risen to become a Tier 10 system-defiant rogue. His skills honed by years of fighting alongside the unpredictable bursts of legacy power. He was Art's anchor in the current system, his bridge to the present. Cipher. The Glitch Hunter became a frequent and always encrypted contact, sharing notes on system anomalies. They began to theorize about the true nature of the Great Data Surge, wondering if it wasn't just a random event, but a deliberate act, a massive, ongoing systemic game with hidden rules. Art established the Legacy Codex, a hidden database of Aethelgard Online lore, meticulously cross-referenced with current system phenomena. It became the ultimate guide for understanding the Aethelgard_variants and, by extension, the fragmented nature of the system itself. Asterisk years passed. Art, the former bookstore owner, was now a venerable elder, his physical form imbued with a calm, almost ethereal energy. He was known as the Architect Prime, the one who understood the deepest secrets of the system. His bookstore, the written word, had expanded, becoming a hub of cross-system research, a place where old lore met new code. Aethos Prime was a different place. The Aethelgard variants were no longer just random threats. They were understood, managed, and even integrated into the New World's ecosystem, thanks to Art's efforts. The legacy players, once relics, were now vital contributors. Their knowledge invaluable for understanding the fragmented nature of reality. The ultimate lesson of Art's journey was not about clinging to the past, but about using the wisdom of the past to build a better future. He had shown that old games, old knowledge, could be just as powerful, if not more so, than the newest, flashiest system update. Art, in his final address to the United System Guilds, spoke not of magic, but of memory. The system is vast, complex, and ever-changing, he stated, his voice resonating with the quiet authority of one who had literally rewritten reality. But within its code are echoes of everything that came before. Learn from the past, understand its glitches, for in them lies the key to our future and the true meaning of this eternal game. The legacy player class, once an impossible anomaly, was now a celebrated path. They were the unsung heroes who ensured that the digital age, for all its chaos, remained rooted in its own history, its own lore. And somewhere in the bustling streets of Mesa, a young adventurer would find a strangely familiar item, a pixelated sword or a glowing potion, and feel a spark of recognition, a whisper from a forgotten age, thanks to Art, the legacy player, who reminded them that in every game, the most important lessons are often found in the oldest code.